Hello everyone, this is Leah Whitehorse from Astrology, and in this recording I'm going to be looking at the astrology of January 2022. The first thing I would like to say is Happy New Year to all of you. I know that we have been going through some very challenging times, and I imagine we still have some challenging times ahead. However, I still feel that we're going to be seeing some other energies coming through into 2022 that will hopefully give us a little bit of a lift, at least, if not a full resolution of some of the big issues that we are dealing with at the moment. As we come into January 2022, we are in a very karmic period of time. I've mentioned this over on my Patreon. I mentioned it in my recent, I think it was the full moon in Gemini. I was talking about this draconic bowl pattern that we have going on in the skies at the moment, where all of the planets are contained within this bowl shape that is edged by the north and south nodes. And it feels like this is a time where it's a bit of a melting pot. We are going through this very powerful process of gestation. Things are changing and growing. And it might feel a little bit confining at times, but also there is something that is coming from this. As I say, the word gestation is the one that comes to mind. I'm thinking about the belly of the bowl, almost like a pregnant belly. So there's that sense that we come into the new year pregnant with possibility, and at the same time with this feeling that things are quite slow and we have to be super patient. There's going to be quite a big build up in Capricorn. Of course, we come into the new year with Venus retrograde in Capricorn, and we've got the Sun in Capricorn, Juno in Capricorn, Pluto, of course, in Capricorn. Mercury in Capricorn, although it will be leaving Capricorn quite soon, but Mercury is also in shadow of its upcoming retrograde period. So Mercury in shadow, Venus retrograde, heavy emphasis on Capricorn, heavy emphasis on this feeling of being contained, confined. So I think we do need to expect things just to be moving quite slowly, and we need to give it time for things to begin to form. We're also getting used to the change, the shift of Jupiter. Jupiter moved into Pisces in December, on the 29th of December, so right at the end of 2021. It's already had a little visit into Pisces in 2021, but then quickly went back into Aquarius. So now here we are again with Jupiter in its own sign. It's the co-ruler, the traditional ruler of Pisces. So it's comfortable in this sign. And I think a notable point to mention here as well is that for the last few years, we've had Jupiter in Capricorn, but Saturn was in Capricorn at the same time. And then we had Jupiter in Aquarius, but Saturn was in Aquarius at the same time. So there's been a long period of time where we've been feeling that any growth in our lives, both personally and collectively, has been muted or limited or compromised in some way. So Jupiter moving into Pisces, leaving Saturn behind in Aquarius, finally means that certainly on an individual level, there's going to be some area of our life where we can actually get some growth without the limitation of Saturn. However, this energy is also a little bit unwieldy at times because there is that formlessness. I spoke about waiting for things to be given form with Capricorn. This is all the imaginative energy of Pisces, which is growing. I mean, it's wonderful for offering up solutions. It's wonderful for searching for meaning, for expanding our spirituality. It's going to be great for writing fantasy books or making fantasy films or sci-fi, all those kinds of things. It's very expansive. But it can also be a very escapist sign. And it's possible that we get this growth of the unknown quantity, because Pisces is all those things that are hidden as well, the things that are behind closed doors, the things that we don't know about. So it's possible that this transit, we meet it with, both the positive and the negative, which is kind of like Pisces. Pisces has got one fish swimming close to the surface and the other fish swimming in the opposite direction below the surface. So I think we should anticipate that we're going to get the positives and the negatives of this transit. Certainly at the beginning of the year, we are just trying to kind of find our feet. It's a little bit like being dumped into very deep water with Jupiter going into Pisces. So yeah, we're trying to learn the lie of this new landscape that we find ourselves in, trying to figure out how we can go with the flow, finding out where the flow is taking us. We don't know yet. We don't know where this tide is taking us. So that's where we need to really drop anchor in all this Capricorn. We need to be really grounded. That's important, because sometimes we can get very carried away with Jupiter in Pisces, and those very big dreams and hopes and aspirations that can come from that transit can end up almost like just being like a bubble, that we can burst the bubble, or the bubble can burst. So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, I think, with Jupiter in Pisces. So on the 2nd of January, Mercury will leave Capricorn, move into Aquarius. But as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a retrograde. Mercury will station retrograde in Aquarius. So it's going to have an extended visit there, but also an extended visit in Capricorn, because it will go back into Capricorn. So the initial movement of Mercury into Aquarius, it's important that we remember that we will be revisiting some of this material. Generally speaking, Mercury going into Aquarius, we've got new ideas. We're thinking in new ways, getting some new perspectives. We also have the new moon in Capricorn also on the same day. So this is the 2nd of January. And of course, the new moon in Capricorn does encourage us to firstly find our footing again. And it tells us that there is some kind of new start as far as the structure is concerned, as far as the system is concerned, as far as work is concerned. It's our professional life. There's a sense that we need to get this foundation stone in place. And it's obviously a perfect time of year to do that. Often the beginning of the year is the time when we're starting to think ahead, thinking of what we want to accomplish this year. So at the new moon in Capricorn, the idea is, okay, what can I do here to make that first step? Or even just to organize it, even just to plan it. And Capricorn is the kind of energy that speaks of like architect plans. So what is your architecture like? How can you draw things up? Even if you can't make any actual movements right now, how can you best prepare? Because this is a super prepared sign as well. So it's a get it together. Let's be really realistic. Let's be sensible. What's the first small step that you can take towards this goal that you have for the year ahead? We reach the midpoint of the Venus retrograde on the 9th of January, when the Sun joins Venus, or Venus joins the Sun. And this is likely to illuminate the truth of the heart, what is going on deep down, to show us what is truly valuable, what is important, because that's the process that we're going through with Venus retrograde in Capricorn, conjunct Pluto as well, stripping away all the inessentials, getting rid of the stuff that's blocking us as far as our relationships are concerned, as far as what we value and our personal values. So the Sun conjunct Venus will really bring things into the light. The retrograde is not over yet, but it's likely we will be at least clearer as to what this particular retrograde means for us. On the 11th of January, Eris is going to station direct, and this is going to tap into, once again, the Eris-Pluto square. Eris is at 23 degrees of Aries. Pluto is at 26 degrees of Capricorn. They are still close enough to be squaring one another. And we've got the Sun and Juno at 21 degrees of Capricorn as well. So it's feeding into a lot of this feeling that there is instability around, that we are challenging a lot of the setups that we have, the systems that we have, the patriarchy, the capitalism. There's a whole big story that's been going on with all of this. Eris square Pluto has been speaking a lot about the power dynamics in our systems. And she has been pointing out the elephant in the room, that, you know, the system that we have isn't really working for us. And there are problems that we need to address and we can't unsee them. So we're likely to experience some rumbles of that, certainly. And on the same day, we also have Mars square to Neptune. So this is an interesting setup because Eris is in Aries, Mars's sign. So Mars is the dispositor of Eris at the moment. And then Mars is in this very uncomfortable square to Neptune. Now, the thing with this particular aspect is that what can happen is sometimes it can sap energy. So Mars square to Neptune can sap energy. We feel tired. We feel defeated. We feel like we want to give up. We feel like we can't do anything or we can't do enough. So those are some of the shadowy expressions of Mars square to Neptune. Positively, it's an aspect that says this is about spiritual warriors. It's what I call the spiritual warrior aspect. This is about spiritual warriors. Rise up. This is a time to really act on our intuition, to use our imagination as a positive, productive tool. But I think with Eris in the background, with Eris square to Pluto, Eris stationing, we may get this momentary disorientation of not really knowing what to do. And I always say, you know, if you don't know what to do, just stand still, get your bearings, especially with Mars being in Sagittarius. It's like he's suddenly lost, you know. Sagittarius is all about traveling and going to places that we've never been before. And it's like that moment when you're on holiday somewhere and you've been walking around some place and suddenly you realize you've got no idea where you are. And because you have no idea where you are, you have no idea how to get back to where you were. So you have to get some direction. You have to figure out where you are right now. So that's going to be really important with this Mars square to Neptune happening on the same day as Eris stationing direct. Mars is then going to go out of bounds on the 13th of January. So that also tells us that for a period of time, we are finding that our actions, I mean, they may be very inspired at times, but also maybe our actions are taking us to a place that we didn't expect. So we do need to just be very conscious of how we are using our energy, the goals that we are working towards, and also looking at our underlying motivation. Every time you're thinking of doing something, it's like, what is my underlying motivation here? Mercury will then station retrograde on the 14th of January. So this, as I said, will be in the sign of Aquarius. So initially, the first part of this transit is going to be asking some questions about our connections as far as society is concerned. So it's looking at our friendships, it's looking at the groups that we belong to. It may also be about politics as well, because Aquarius can be associated with politics. So asking questions about politicians, I think we've probably been doing enough of that already. But anyway, Mercury's going to just have a little bit more of a conversation here. We need to be talking about what we are going towards, what we are moving towards, the future. Aquarius is about the future. So there's a lot of questions around these things as well. We then move to the full moon in Cancer on the 17th of January. And this is going to be a particularly potent lunation because the sun will just be coming off a conjunction to Pluto. So basically the moon in Cancer will oppose the sun in Capricorn and also Pluto in Capricorn. And both of them, or all of them, are squaring Eris. So we go right back to that story about Eris square to Pluto. So the moon in Cancer, of course, the moon is in its own sign, so it's working particularly strongly. And we are very, very invested in our home, our personal lives, what's going on at home, and the need to feel safe, the need to feel secure. And when we have the Cancer moon opposed by Pluto, there is sometimes a feeling of being under threat. And we feel like, it's almost like trying to keep the wolf from the door, that kind of sense. I want to shut the door to everything and everyone and just make it all go away. But then Eris comes in and says, no, that's not going to happen. We need to make sure that, our home life is okay and that we feel good privately in our own little world, but we can't forget about what's going on out there. We need to manage things. And that's also the sun in Capricorn as well. That's the energy of Capricorn, the manager, the boss. And we are quite capable of doing that. But it kind of feels a little bit like this lunation perhaps will highlight some tensions between home life and work life. That might be a very simple way that it plays out for a lot of us. Of course, it might be that there are some issues going on out there in the world. Remembering right now, as I'm recording this on the 19th of December, certainly in the UK, we are seeing an explosion of Omicron, the new version of coronavirus, the new mutation, which has just exploded onto the scene. And we are already starting to hear about lots and lots and lots of people having to take time off work, Capricorn. And that is going to threaten the system, Pluto in Capricorn, threatening the system, Venus retrograde in Capricorn as well. So obviously, I'm not sure what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks or so. But there's a lot of talk about things being shut down again, so lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. It's possible that's what this is alluding to, on the world stage, as well as other things, as well as the awareness that the system is just generally struggling and is problematic with Eris being there. So we're just having to manage some of these feelings that are coming up, and making sure that we address our needs, our emotional needs, which is very much the moon in Cancer, and giving ourselves security, because the moon in Cancer can feel very tender and very exposed in opposition to Pluto. So yes, we need to just give ourselves a little bit of comfort and nurturing so that we can then deal with what is going on outside the front door. Uranus will station direct on the 18th of January, so it begins its forward motion again. And generally speaking, when any planet is stationing, whether it's retrograde or direct, we tend to get a little bit of a wobble around that time, again, like we're trying to find our feet. And Uranus in Taurus is a little bit uncomfortable for us anyway, because we are going through this process of very rapid change that is happening around those things that we thought would never change. With Taurus, Taurus is about all those things that are really fixed and stable and well, this is how we do things and we're not going to change anything because it's really comfortable like this. And then Uranus comes along and says, hey, you need to change your values. You need to change how you use your resources. You need to change how you use your money and what you think of as precious. You need to change your food systems. There's so many things that are changing all at once. So we might be more conscious of that as Uranus stations direct. Also on this date, very importantly, the north and south nodes will change signs. So this is a very dynamic shift as the north node also enters into Taurus and then the south node goes into Scorpio. So the north node is moving into the sign where Uranus is at the moment. It's going to start to amplify that Uranian energy. Even though it's not conjunct for quite some time, there will be a conjunction between Uranus and the North Node, and it's going to join with Mars as well, but that's a little bit later down the line. But even from the start, we are going to start to see that these issues, precisely the issues, Taurus, of our resources, money, what we think of as precious, and our long-term security, all these things are going to be brought into view by the North Node, because this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. South Node, Scorpio, we need to move away from being a throwaway society and towards a society that has more appreciation, Taurus, for the simple things in life. We need to move away from the toxic complexities, the shadowy stuff, the jealousies, the envy, the unpleasant behavior, and simply the mess that we are in, Scorpio, so that we can really set up something that is much more basic, Taurus, that is going to give us something that is much more grounded. We need to get grounded with the North Node in Taurus. We need to get real. We need to know what we need to survive. We need to survive. That's the thing with the North Node in Taurus, is actually pointing to this issue of our survival. And Uranus in Taurus is saying to survive, we need to change things. So there's going to be a lot of emphasis on this. In a way, we could also translate the South Node in Scorpio as a message from the universe to say, we need to relinquish control. We need to relinquish control, stop trying to control every little thing, and move towards the North Node in Taurus, organic growth, to allow for organic growth. And as I say it, I'm thinking of the word organic and the fact that Uranus in Taurus is saying we need to make changes around our food, so organic foods, and making sure that the crops that we are growing have life in them instead of trying to control nature. We need to let nature teach us. We move into Aquarius season on the 20th of January. So this is when the sun enters Aquarius. So it will highlight, illuminate those energies of Aquarius, which speak of innovation, change, doing things differently. It's a fresh blast of air, especially after being in rather stuffy Capricorn for the last month and all that other energy that's going on in Capricorn at the moment. So we get a blast of fresh air coming through with the sun entering Aquarius. And then we also get the midpoint of the Mercury retrograde when the sun meets Mercury on the 23rd of January. So similar to the sun conjunct Venus, at these midpoints of the retrograde period, we often have illumination of the main issue, problem that we are dealing with during this retrograde period. Something comes to light and we are starting to bring heart and mind together with the sun and Mercury coming together. Mars will then enter Capricorn, the sign of its exaltation, on the 24th of January. So Mars works really well in Capricorn. If we think about it, Mars is very much a planet that is associated with goal setting and go-getting. It's a very fiery upstart of a planet. But Capricorn contains all of that. Capricorn gives it form and structure. So Mars going into Capricorn, it rather has that energy of like a sergeant major. Everything is planned out. The campaign is planned out. The strategy is planned out. And now you've got your orders. Just do it. Just do it. Keep going. So we really get a lot of fortitude that comes through with Mars entering Capricorn. Mercury retrograde will then re-enter Capricorn at the other end of the sign on the 26th of January. So we've been doing this questioning about our friendships and social connections, politics, groups. And now we start to ask some questions about our foundations, our structures. Again, this whole issue about the system that we are in. There's so much going on with this right now, and a lot of it really leads back to Pluto. In fact, Mercury will meet with Pluto just as Venus made 3 conjunctions to Pluto, so will Mercury. So there's a lot of emphasis on really getting our heads into the game here. It's almost like Venus conjunct Pluto 3 times, and in a very long conjunction whilst she's retrograde in Capricorn, has really spoken about what I said before about stripping away the stuff that blocks the heart, that is kind of toxic material, getting to the truth of what's going on in our hearts. And then Mercury comes along and also has to do this work. So we have to translate that, what we feel in our hearts, through to our heads so that we can make some decisions or we can have some conversations. Sometimes we kind of know stuff inside, but it doesn't always translate into being able to communicate that. So it's almost like Mercury going back into Capricorn and meeting up with Pluto. It's really going to help us to figure out how to articulate these powerful truths that we are learning. On the 28th of January, Venus and Mars move into orb of a very long conjunction. It's going to be a 4-month conjunction. This is very rare. The actual conjunction dates will be the 16th of February and the 6th of March, but we are beginning this at the end of January. And I think this is very important because, of course, we are just coming to the end of Venus retrograde. In fact, Venus stations direct the following day on the 29th of January. Also on that date as well, Mercury is going to meet up with Pluto. So all this stuff about the truths that we are trying to articulate, the truth of what's going on in our heart, the revelations that we have had from these main movements then need to be translated into some kind of action with Mars. And what we do, the actions that we take from the heart whilst Venus and Mars are traveling together, are also going to be bound up with our karmic journey, because Venus is now the dispositor, the ruler of the North Node, Taurus, and Mars is the co-ruler of the South Node, Scorpio. So this long Venus conjunction to Mars really tells us that there is something important here at work. Any transit that is extended in some way really captures our attention, and that's kind of the point. Venus speaks about what we are attracted to, and Mars is the desire to go after what we are attracted to. And this is why we've had to get really clear about what is truly important, because we need to ensure that our goals are aligned with our spiritual evolution. This concludes my reading for January 2022. If you would like to have more information on these movements, do check out my Patreon. I will stick a link in the box below. And on that, I have weekly forecasts, as well as lots and lots of other posts available, depending on what tier you are on. So do check that out. But otherwise, I hope you have found this recording helpful, and I wish you many blessings on your path.